I want you guys to think about when was the last time that you smiled. I'm not talking about the smile that you do for pictures. I'm talking about one that starts from your eyes, that talks about real joy. So raise your hand if you smiled today. How about yesterday and today? That looks like pretty much everyone. That's good. All right, my second question is for you. When was the last time that you laughed? A real belly laugh, the kind that relaxes your shoulders. Sometimes you're sore the next day if you laugh a lot. How many of you have laughed that really good laugh in the last 3 days? In the last week? Okay, fewer of you, but still a pretty good number. Think about the last time that you played. Doing something because you enjoyed it, and that's the only reason. Not running an errand for your kids, doing something like a board game, or going for a walk by yourself. How many of you have done something like that in the last 3 days? How about the last week? It's the fewest yet, guys. We gotta work on this. This is me at age 4, having the absolute best time. I'm going to talk to you today about the importance of play, especially for adults. And I'm going to talk to you about the gap in accessibility for play for people with disabilities. The desire to play is a primal emotion. We're born with it, just like we were born with fear or anger. It exists in an ancient part of our brain, and it's a fundamental part of our neural wiring. Now, one of the pioneers of this kind of research is this guy right here. His name is Jaak Panksepp, and he did a really interesting TED Talk at TEDxBarringtonAreaLibrary called The Science of Emotions. So if you're interested in all of the mechanisms behind where our emotions come from, I encourage you to check this out. What it means, the fact that we are hardwired to play, is this. The drive to play is as fundamental as our drives for food and the science is clear. The joy of play nourishes your mind just as food nourishes your body. It is an inescapable part of who we are as a person. We have our own play fingerprint as well. This is actually true for all mammals, not just us humans, that we have kinds of play that we prefer, and those preferences get stronger as we get older. These are 2 horses from the program that I work at. The guy in the front, the brown one, his name is Charlie, and he is very playful. And the guy behind him, his name is Kachi, and that's his best friend. And he is enticing Kachi to play his favorite game, which is try to get this thing away from me. It may be a little hard for you to see it, but he's got one of those plastic rings that we use to put on cones and stuff, and he is doing his best to say, come play with me, but don't. Come play with me, but stay away. All mammals have this kind of play that they prefer, but as we grow from children to adults, there's pressure from society, from our work, from ourselves, to get serious and to move away from frivolous things like play. And that is a huge mistake. Now, before we get into the big details, I want you to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about play. The first kind of play that we encounter is right at birth, and it's called attunement. This is the connection that we have when we're babies with our caretakers. Laying on mom's chest, skin to skin, smiling, making eye contact. This kind of play creates the neural pathways that are the foundation for trust. The second one is body and movement, and this is a big one. We start playing with our arms and legs and squirming around in the womb, and then we graduate to squirming around out of the womb, and then crawling and walking and running. For most people, our skills only increase as we get older for a time. We get greater muscle control and greater strength. we're eventually capable of some pretty incredible feats of strength for our size. So for some of us, that incredible feat of strength is getting out of the bed in the morning. For others, it's picking up one of those 250-pound rocks in those competitions. Have you guys seen that? You know what I'm talking about? It's incredible. But we connect deeply with movement, and it activates a bunch of connection areas in our brain, the ones for learning, for innovation, adaptability, and resilience. Studies show that moving your body is one of the most important things that you can do for both your mental health and your physical health. The highest periods of movement in play are the times of the most rapid growth of your cerebellum. So I think most of us have heard from experts, if you're stuck in a rut, if you don't have creativity, if you're trying to think of something at work and it's just not coming to you, get up, stretch at your desk, go for a walk. The next kind of play is this is the one that we consider fun. This is putting together a puzzle. This is playing basketball. This is banging on pots and pans in your kitchen with a wooden spoon. All of these are the result of a brain that gets better at identifying and solving system problems every time we play an object game. Imaginative play starts at around age 2, and it gets more elaborate as we age. How many of you here have a 3-year-old, 3 or 4-year-old in your life, and you've talked to them recently? Just one, but how many of you, yeah, there we go. The things that come out of their mouth are wild. And that only gets better as we get older and more elaborate. The human imagination is limitless. And making up stories, especially stories that combined the real and the imagined, helps the brain make leaps of logic and also nourishes our human spirit. Social play. This is one that's a source of both joy and pain for us. Humans are incredibly social creatures, and playing together helps us build connections. It's how we build friendships, and it's how we create trust in ourselves and trust in others. It's the basis for all of our relationships with the world. Now this next one, this one's the controversial one. Rough and tumble play is play fighting, and it often includes shouting and bodily contact. We adults get a little squirrely when we see kids engaging in this kind of play, but research shows that this is one of the most important ways for developing altruism, cooperation, socialization, and a sense of fairness. If we interrupt this and we don't allow our kids to rough and tumble play, it actually hampers their ability to understand fair play, and it can even lead to poor impulse control as we're adults. This is one for the adults in here. This is one that is almost exclusively done by adults. We bring children along for it, but it's not something that they initiate. And this is things like holiday get-togethers, birthday celebrations, and religious observations. Something really interesting to note is that we often connect things that are celebratory and solemn. So think about a solemn wedding ceremony followed by a not so solemn wedding reception, or a funeral followed by a wake. It's the way that we can process the full spectrum of emotion. And last but not least, storytelling and narrative. Storytelling is the essence of who we are. It's what we tell ourselves about the world and how we make sense of it. Stories are what we tell ourselves to justify making the decisions that we do, and they're especially important to our sense of right and wrong. Play is, at its core, the way that we learn how to acquire the skills that we need to become a successful adult. But here's the cool part. Play's benefits don't stop when you're kids. We keep growing, and they're great for us adults too. Here are some ways that they benefit us. Stress relief, improving our brain function, boosting creativity, fostering a connection between others and ourselves. It keeps you feeling young, develops our social skills, and that is something that we especially need to work on since the pandemic. This is something that adults can always work on. Encouraging cooperation, and it helps us heal our emotional wounds. I am the executive director of a facility here in Barrington called Walk On. We do equine-assisted activities for people with disabilities. We do horseback riding, carriage driving, and groundwork programs. We start with kids as young as 3, all the way up to our senior programs for people who are well into their 90s. I get to see people play and enjoy themselves every single day at my job. 1 in 5 people in the United States has a disability. That's right now about 66 million people. And that stat only goes up as we age. 48% of people over the age of 60 have a disability of some kind. Somewhere around 50% of disabled people, which is more than 30 million people, get little to no physical exercise. Play should not be reserved for just the able-bodied. Some of the reasons that disabled individuals don't exercise are transportation issues, financial limitations, but 2 of the biggest ones are negative support from their caretakers and a lack of policy for residential and day programming. As children age out of the school system and become adults, their access to play becomes very limited. There are day programs out there, but especially for physical activity, they can be hard to come by or are not of the quality that they deserve. There are millions of people in the United States every day who do not have access to programs that engage their minds and bodies. Even programs like Walk On, where we're specifically dedicated to people with disabilities, can struggle to help people as they become adults. So we started things like our carriage driving program, because a height limit does not exist with the carriage program. A weight limit does not exist. We're able to put people on the back of this carriage to help support someone who is unable to support themselves. When we talk about equitable use and accessibility, what we're talking about is a place, an activity, or an idea where diversity is both respected and valued. There's ways to do this, especially in a physical space or at Walk On. And that can be through equipment that can be used by anyone. That equipment can be used in multiple ways, and that is easy to use without having to read the directions. And this one is hard for us adults sometimes. But we also, this equipment or these activities can be where there's no wrong way to be. What's one person's wrong way of doing something is somebody else's creativity. Our brains are incredible and can process things in so many different ways. You can see here, this is one of our meet and greet sessions. All of our barn lessons, whenever somebody comes there, they are goal oriented. So we have temporary goals, which would be learning to hold the reins correctly or stopping the carriage between the 2 poles, things that you can work towards. But we have an overarching goal for all of our lessons, and that goal is to have fun. There are participants whose only real goal in the lesson is for them to have fun. And that's because it may be the only time that our participants get to be wholly themselves. A lot of people with disabilities, especially with intellectual, do not get to make decisions for themselves very often. They are told where to be, where to go, what to do, often for their own safety or because they have a hard time communicating those for themselves. But when they come to Walk On, we do our very best to make sure that they are able to make as many decisions for themselves and that they're just there to have a good time. We have some seniors who come to our seniors programs who don't leave their facility for anything except for their visit to Walk On. I'm going to tell you guys a story about Frank. This is Frank in the photo with Rocky. Frank was a very angry man. He lived at a senior living facility in Barrington, and he hated it. He didn't have any friends. He wouldn't talk with anyone. He never went to any programs, and he would throw things, try to get physical with the staff. But for some reason, he signed up to come up to walk on one day. And he made this immediate connection with Rocky. You can see them talking here. And Rocky would lay his head on his lap, and Frank would just pet him. Usually our animals like just kind of hang out. They're there to like, you know, be petted. They're like chill about it, but it's like nothing special. Just, you know, part of their everyday job. Some of them are there for the snacks. But there was an instant connection between Rocky and Frank. So much so that Frank decided to sign up to come out again the next time. Same thing, connection with Rocky. They were just in their own little world. And then Frank asked Mary for something. We have one of these little Breyer horses in our viewing room that looked just like Rocky, and he asked if he could take it home. And Mary said, "You can, but it has to be an exchange. You have to go to the art program in your facility, draw me some pictures of Rocky, bring them back." The next time he came, he had his pictures. We made the exchange, we hung them up. Frank continued to come for several months until one of the aides pulled Mary, our program director, aside and said, "I don't think you understand what's happened here because you didn't know Frank before he started coming here." Told us about how angry he was, how unhappy he was. He now goes to programming. He goes to the art classes. He goes to the concerts that they have. He makes friends. He goes to lunch with everybody. We did not make that change at Walk On. That was a change that Frank had to make inside himself, facilitated by Rocky. He made a connection with the animal, and he had a chance to get outside of that tiny, miserable world that he had created for himself. Those little bits of play that brought in a huge change in his life. This is the kind of connection that we risk missing out on when we build a world where we limit access to play, for people with disabilities and for ourselves. Play is essential to who we are and how we see the world around us. So my charge for you is when you leave here, try to incorporate play, more you time, things that you do solely because you enjoy them. Go for a walk. Try to laugh every day. Find something fun to do. Try a new hobby, an art. Take up a sport that you haven't tried before. And in everything that you do, please try to bring accessibility and inclusion to these new and old spaces, because play is for everyone.